You're listening to the Truck Talk with Trivista podcast, brought to you by Trivista Companies, the ultimate source for all things trucking, and sponsored by Louisville Masonry and Stone in Louisville, Kentucky, where beauty and function meet. I'm Anita Massey, Director of Marketing for Trivista Companies. Thanks for joining us. So today we're continuing our telematics series, and our topic is going to be why you should invest in telematics. We're being joined by Jim O'Halloran, CEO of Trivista Companies, and Danny O'Halloran, Telematics Specialist and Aftermarket Sales Coordinator. Jim and Danny, thank you both for talking with us today.
Well, thank you. Appreciate the invite.
Thanks for having us.
Happy to have you guys. So let's start out, Danny, and why don't you start by telling some of the main reasons that companies have historically explored a telematics solution?
Absolutely. So I like to frame a lot of this discussion around the legislative history. Now, there have been some telematics providers working for decades at this point, but really what the biggest push was for interest and adoption of telematics was MAP 21, or Moving Ahead for Progress in the 21st Century, a piece of legislation signed by President Barack Obama in 2012. The whole structure of this was to provide more funding for transportation programs to be future-proofed for what is to come and what was to come. So what this really meant was drivers were going to need to start this process of getting used to a different way of tracking their hours of service. So one of the big pieces of this was what's called an ELD, or an electronic logging device. And essentially that is when the truck starts moving, your hours start going. It's a simplified way to think about it. But this legislation really pushed a lot of companies to start to look at who could be a telematics provider and give that conduit for compliance. So long story short, compliance with regulation drove one of the biggest pushes in telematics. However, outside of the regulatory environment, and where telematics first made its most significant impact was simply through the introduction of track and trace. And that is, in other words, that's dots on the map, where the vehicle is at throughout the day, and an ability to recreate trips after the fact. So into the 1990s and early 2000s, this looked like a satellite installation on trucks with a significant price tag to be able to provide that basic track and trace capability. But that brought visibility into the equation for managing fleets, and it was a game changer. Data-driven decision-making became possible, and fleet managers and fleet owners now had layers of insight, where previously they simply had to communicate direct with drivers via something like a cell phone in order to kind of make that call, if at all having that conduit of communication. So stepping into that regulatory compliance piece as well, one thing that's part and parcel with telematics is the regulatory, the piece of legislation known as the International Fuel Tax Agreement. And this was a game-changing regulatory move in itself because it simplified so much for drivers in the industry. Rather than having to, at every jurisdiction or state, purchase a permit to capture and account for the wear and tear on the road by way of a fuel tax, we now simplified this process to have now today 48 contiguous United States, as well as Canada and Mexico, having part with this process that helps to account for and distribute the amount of miles driven and gallons of fuel purchased across the jurisdictions, so that there is a even spread, if you will, of dollars to account for and repair the roads where trucks have been driving. So bringing that all back, a lot of what brought telematics into the fold for people was first this regulatory push, and that came about in 2017 when MAP 21 fully came into effect. And from there, there's really quite a larger value story that we've begun to identify over time. And I'm sure we'll get into that here soon. So.
Wow.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for that thorough intro. Those were some pretty compelling reasons, I would say, to move to a telematics solution. Jim, how about you? How are you seeing the technology change over time? What's happening today?
Sure. It's funny when hearing Danny talk about all that stuff, it brings back memories. Some things you just forget, right? It just kind of happens. So I can remember sitting with, there was a gentleman named Chad Johnson who now works with Trivista, but at the time he was a VP of fleet for a company called Smithway Motor Express in Fort Dodge, Iowa. And they had just signed on an agreement with PeopleNet, which was, the kind of they and Omnitracs were the two biggest sources of telematics back in the late 90s, early 2000s, and it was the coolest technology. He put it up on a wall map, and you could just watch his trucks going down the road. And that was the holy grail right there, was knowing where every asset was. The other piece that it allowed for, cell phones back in those days, they weren't, either they were really big and clunky or they didn't exist at all. So it was a method for talking to their drivers and saying, you need to go here, here's where your next route will be. So those were the two primary drivers of telematics, and they were big. You were right, Danny. There was the Omnitracs was this big disc that was on the back of the cab, and on a sleeper truck, and and it was sending these waves. Well, so if you fast forward to the 2017, we had a friend that had gotten into, they were kind of almost like a prophecy that they saw that this thing was coming. So they became a Geotab reseller. And at the time, I kid him now because I think they were just about 6 months or 8 months ahead of their time, because they tried to get fleets to buy off on, well, everybody's going to need to do this because of electronic logs as a result of MAP 21. Well, nobody wanted to do it, because if I'm a driver, and that means now I'm going to have a little bit more restraint, a little bit more eyes on me, and that becomes hard as a driver trying to make a buck. Um, so they introduced this thing, and in 2017, everybody came kicking and screaming to the table because they did not want to do this, because it was infringement on my rights. It was this, that, and the other, and but they did it because they had to. And then what has morphed over the last 5 years, and what we'll cover as we go forward, is now it's like, holy cow, I can't imagine not having telematics, because of all the insights that I gain, whether it be driver behavior, whether it be data from the engine, whether it be predictive maintenance, and then just thinking about where this is going to morph to as we move to electrification on assets and other things. So it was fun to hear the history lesson, because I've forgotten all of that stuff, and it just reminded me of what that looked like, and then today and going forward, what it's going to be even more efficient.
That's pretty cool. So, Danny, what considerations should someone make when they're looking at the options for telematics service providers?
Yeah, that's a great question. Certainly, since the days of Omnitracs or PeopleNet, it was a very short list of those who were certified by the FMCSA to kind of provide some of these things. And a lot of this certification really didn't come about until MAP 21, and we had this ELD consideration. So where it started with, well, the market's about this big, now there are dozens of telematics service providers here in the United States. So to that end, it's a difficult process for a lot of people, especially if you've never had the time or bandwidth to look into or fully understand telematics in itself. I like to say this, and I'll repeat it here from our last podcast, that telematics, it's telecommunications and informatics, but that's just where your truck is at and what's going on under the hood. That's really what we're trying to combine here. So when I'm considering or looking at what provider makes sense for a customer, it's really great to first figure out your fleet size, and then, of course, your application. What is your industry that you are primarily operating within? So, for example, we're a Geotab reseller, and when you talk to some of the municipalities, for example, we work with the city of Grimes, when you talk with them and you talk to also the public works officials, it's clear that the choice for municipalities is Geotab. And this is because of a long history of having a strong team to be able to reverse engineer and create hardware and harnesses to get a wide array of vehicles on the same system. So if you're in public works, you're likely going to look at something like a Geotab. Now, if you're looking to have things integrated under a broader umbrella and getting from a telematics service provider to incorporating with something like a transportation management system, some of those players like Omnitrax we mentioned before tend to have a larger market penetration. So ultimately, the questions you want to ask yourself are: what's your fleet size, what's your application, and what are one or two use cases that initially bring you interest when thinking about this idea of GPS and diagnostics coming together. And that really kind of is what we try to do for our customers. We don't believe there's a one-size-fits-all solution, would be another way to say that.
Okay. So can you expound on how Trivista likes to integrate telematics solutions for the customers? How do we do that personally?
Absolutely. So from our body of Geotab customers, there's a wide variety of kind of application and who we're working with. So we have an array from owner operators who have 1 to 2 trucks, and what they need in terms of support and how they use a telematics solution looks quite different than, for example, a agricultural operation of which we support a handful. So the owner operator, they're very much focused on compliance, so electronic logging as well as IFTA, like we mentioned before, and then being able to look at some basic things along the side. So idling, being able to have some reporting and control over their idling, as well as fuel economy. Fuel economy, more than anything today, is a significant consideration and a reason why an investment in telematics really makes sense. That cost per gallon is going up and up. And even trying to optimize routes can only do so much. But if you have a dedicated process to look at and manage and monitor your fuel economy, a lot of our customers realize some significant savings there. So moving to something like an agricultural operator, or like I mentioned, the City of Grimes, a public works kind of installation. Jim, do you want to talk a little bit about what that's been like working with the City of Grimes?
Yeah, I think maybe if I could just take a step back even from that and just, so you're talking about what matters. And the hard part is that like we have already articulated, some came kicking and screaming they had to do it. And you had to meet the ELD and different requirements. But now that you've got this data, the second problem that has become, we become aware of more and more is sometimes you can get too much data and you can become paralyzed by having all this data. And what do I do with it? And so, a lot of it, you choose a telematics provider, like Danny talked about, what's important to you, but 2 is how much bandwidth do I even have to manage it? So that gentleman, like the owner operator that you talk about, they don't have, they're trying to go down the road, and then so they just give me enough to be compliant, and then if it gives me some warnings, great, and maybe I can use it to be predictive that way. Like a municipal, like a City of Grimes, they have a little bit more time, and they want to use that for route optimization. They want to use that to tie into the grid of the city, and they want to use that to tie into things that tell the city and all its residents what has been plowed and when was the last time it was plowed and how much, and what does the ice cover layer look like. And so they are using it in incredible ways in the city of West Des Moines, very in a similar manner too. And so I think that's another piece that has morphed out of this, is that it almost becomes too much. And so when you ask, what does Trivista try to look at, is, okay, how can we help you manage that? I mean, we're not in our primary business isn't to sell telematics devices. So we're kind of different than your local Radio Shack or many retailers, resellers of this equipment. Our tool is we want to try to get you so your truck stays on the road. That's our focus. And so whatever we need to do, if it gives us visibility, gives you visibility, that's what we try to look at.
I like that we're able to customize the solutions for each customer. That's pretty great that we can offer that service. Let me toss this question out to each of you, and you guys can probably both speak on it. What if a business doesn't fall under MAP 21 for ELD use? Why should those folks consider telematics? Jim, you want to start?
Sure, I can start. I think, some of the things that we've already even talked about. So obviously municipals don't fall under MAP 21. They don't have any ELD requirements, and that's probably fortunate when some of those snowplow events where they're out 12 and 14 hours on the road. But like I talked about, some of the things that they might want to do is they might want to tell their constituents what's been plowed and where are we at with that. Um, I think there are, I think about ag entities, and maybe they're tying it into some of the other services that they provide their farmer owners, so to speak, farmer members, and telling them where their trucks are at and where they're coming in. It helps for planning. Now, knowing when my truck's going to be arriving, if I'm a distribution fleet, and knowing that it's going to be coming, or telling and alerting a potential stop, hey, this truck should be there in 15 minutes, and so I think there's some things that telematics gives ICE to, where it's, from the tele side, where's this thing at? And then what we try to use it for, and what a fleet could also use it for, is the maintenance side, and getting into the predictive side of maintenance and knowing when events might happen, and then keeping you on task for oil changes and preventative maintenance, because we still say that an hour of preventative maintenance probably saves you 10 hours of breakdown, and that's really critical in a time like this. So those are things that I think about, Danny. I don't know, maybe articulate a few others here.
Yeah, that was really well put. I think that gets a lot of that. Not. There's a large potential opportunity, and the way I think about it is the regulation shouldn't be what drives the investment. I think the value proposition, in some of the things you've mentioned, I'll step back to what I said earlier about just data-driven decision making and how significant that is to give your employees, to give your fleet managers the power and confidence behind a decision they make, because they can point to metrics, they can point to a pattern. And there are exemptions and exceptions to the ELD mandate, and this is really who we're talking to. Short haul exemptions, last mile of delivery. A lot of these things, again, they don't require you to have an electronic logging device. However, if you were able to take some time, perhaps even a trial with Trivista, to look at what we can do for you with regard to a routing and dispatch solution, or how we can take some of the data that's passively gathered on these devices and build you a new view of your fleet that shows you ranked quality based on idling, fuel economy, as well as that maintenance history. Remote diagnostics is kind of where telematics is going in terms of, just like you alluded to, the predictive in lieu of the reactive. So I think that this market and this medium duty often is kind of in that similar space. There are so many areas where you can realize value in terms of time saved, dollars saved, or in a very broad sense, safety. One of the things I find to be most compelling and exciting about a telematics solution is a robust safety program. And that's really a lot of the onus behind the MAP 21 legislation as well. Safer operations, by giving companies a set of regulations that try to drive accountability around critical hours of service regulations. We're creating a safer environment for all drivers on the road, for all drivers, and trying to push forward that these breaks and the way that we structured around a schedule, it's for the safety of everybody who operates on these roads. So long-winded answer again, but it comes down to the fact that there really is no one-size-fits-all solution, and also there's no one or two sets of use cases that drive somebody to telematics. The last thing I'll say here is that I use an analogy of a Swiss Army knife or a multi-tool, and that these regulatory pieces, just ELD and IFTA compliance, that's the base of the tool. That's the shell of the knife, but inside are dozens and dozens of tools, routing to idling management, fuel economy, safety programming, and it's really just a great, exciting thing to work with customers from where they started, and then starting to find ways to expand on that value with their existing investment.
Yeah, and that's a great analogy, I think, the Swiss Army knife, because clearly this is a multi-pronged platform or technology with lots of moving parts. So I think that's a good analogy for people to refer back to. So we've been talking about the history and the present aspects of telematics, but Danny, can you speak a little bit on what's new and exciting in the telematics space?
Absolutely. So when I said that safety is something that I find myself, most compelled about in this space. What's really exciting that's coming is video telematics. So this is, and it can be a more controversial, kind of like was alluded to, that just the introduction of this new device that's giving GPS, while now adding some visual context to events. Certainly, it's a difficult conversation, but it really comes down to how you discuss it and whether and to what extent you're involving the drivers in that conversation. But video telematics, today, when you're looking with the telematics device, you might, in a trip period, get notice of harsh events like harsh braking, harsh cornering, and speeding. However, those are just numbers at that point, and if you're going to work with a driver on those metrics, all you have is those numbers and maybe where it happened on the map. But what if, before you brought the information to that driver, you're able to look at a quick visual context? Because a lot of video telematics, the misconception is that every fleet manager now will have a large screen with a live feed of all these cameras up. But one, that would be nearly impossible to manage, and two, it would absolutely blow past the capabilities today with regard to data, and it would be very costly to share that much data. So really what's happening is it's event-driven video telematics. So when an event happens, something that you're already tracking inside of your telematics solution, now we're going to add a little visual context. So when I see 5 harsh breaks that happened in a 1-hour trip, and then I look back and I see that 4 of those were my driver actually safely avoiding an accident event from being cut off, for example, well, no longer is that harsh braking a demerit, but rather it's an opportunity to talk and say, okay, wow, so I see that you're actually having to avoid while being on this route. Is this something that's happening often? Maybe we could try to look at optimizing or changing this route. So right there, video telematics, I think, is going to bring about such a new way to interact with this information, and adds a new layer of data. And I'll say it probably 5 times this podcast, that when you can empower individuals with a tool that they like to use, and it provides this conduit to drive your decisions with rich data, they're more confident, more engaged, and excited to work with it. And that's a win for everybody.
And I would take the practical side of it from the business owner side and say, and if you are in an accident event and you've got video recording of it, many times we have heard customers who have saved more of the cost of the implementing those tools themselves with the savings on the insurance event, because of realizing that, hey, it really wasn't the truck's fault, and because the truck generally will get they're presumed guilty until proven innocent, kind of a theme. So
yeah, good point, Jim. So Jim, are there any complementary solutions to what a telematics solution provider can provide that you can talk about today?
Well, I think we've been really sharing a lot of those as we've been going along. I think just the driver, the tools to help drivers be better drivers, or the tools to predict what's happening to your truck. This whole piece about how legislation has to drive this change of behavior. It's true in so many things. So, yes, it came kicking and screaming in 2017, and now everybody wants it. It's not all that different than electrification has already started to go that route. You mandatorily need to change because of emission requirements, but at the end of the day, the mom wants to know that her child's being picked up in something other than a vehicle that might be emitting carbon and everything else into the air. And so behaviors will change as we go along. And so I think what we're seeing in telematics is very similar to that, in that there's a lot of different ways to use that conduit called telematics to provide more information, and make you a better fleet and to be more efficient. And in this day and age with $6 diesel, you need to be as efficient as you possibly can. That's a big deal.
Yeah, exactly. So I guess I'll ask each of you, maybe Danny, you can start, but why Geotab and why Trivista? Why that combo?
Yeah, definitely. So just to your last question, that I think it flows right through, is that the complementary solutions, well, that depends on your telematics service provider. So in terms of Geotab, where we found a lot of value in aligning with Geotab is that it's uniquely an open architecture platform. So that means Geotab has built they've built a platform with an enormous amount of connectivity. And so they don't pretend or posit that they're going to solve for every single potential solution that a customer might need solved for in their operation. But they will and have created a robust SDK or software development kit with a wide array of APIs so that your existing software can likely be ported in and presented in one singular dashboard when you log into my Geotab. So that in itself is a significant advantage for the reality that there is no common one-size-fits-all fleet archetype, right? So every operation is going to be a little bit uniquely different, whether it's the vehicle makeup, whether it's the geographic locations that they're operating in, or there's so many different variables that can come up there. But you alluded to this earlier, Anita, as well, that we have an array of plans with Geotab. Some telematics service providers, you're going to pay one rate and they'll open the door to all features and functionality. But where we think and what we believe is the more effective and honest to the customer model is that we'll fit your operational needs. So based on what you want to do, we'll tailor a plan and serve up the data that fits exactly that and nothing more. We don't want to overwhelm, like my dad alluded to earlier, as it can happen, is that when you get hit with data and you're not used to managing data, it can be a lot. And so taking a tapered approach and slowly finding that value so that if you start on one of our lower tier plans and for a year, that's exactly what you needed. But after that year, you're feeling a lot more comfortable and confident and interested in trying to get some more value out of that solution. And we might need to adjust how much data that you're getting access to. Well, we also don't operate as a Geotab reseller with a contract model, so we're able to do month to month and therefore can switch quickly over to the plan that fits your needs, especially, and this is a common example, as your fleet grows. We can adapt to that's a progression of your company over time. So other platforms, they get noisy and they try to provide an answer for everything, but that's kind of like getting the answers to questions you're not asking yet. So while it can give you some potential to realize value with the right bandwidth, which is one of the biggest restrictions on most operations, they might not have a person internally that'll be able to manage and own some of this stuff. And that's what we try to provide too is, well, we'll take care of that for you. So Geotab answers that set of problems with options on levels of data and supported features.
Yeah, and they've done a really good job of even morphing so that, because one of the ththings, again, like I talked way back in the beginning with a Omnitrax and a PeopleNet, was it was not only for knowing where your truck was at, but it was the communication tool with the driver. And it also helped with dispatching and route planning and all that kind of stuff. And what Geotab has done a nice job of is emulating some of that and not trying to drive you to one piece, that just allow you to pick and choose as you need to go. So I think that's been a really good, and they're agnostic to, they don't care what make it is, they don't care where you're going, what brand or anything else. And that's kind of been our approach too, has been, we don't, that doesn't matter to us. Again, our goal is to help you keep your trucks on the road regardless of what they are.
Okay, so do you offer trials or other opportunities that customers can use to work with Geotab in tertiary programs?
Yeah, one of the things it's really challenging sometimes is that you think about the disruption that having to switch a telematics provider would cause. And so if you said, all right, we're just going to sell you this, and either you take it or you don't, that could be a kind of an easy way to say, you know what, I can't afford to do that, because I can't go in and take out all my old ones and put in these new ones, because what if they don't work? So I know Danny's been very good about offering, let's put a couple, 3 in your fleet, and we'll run them side by side with whatever you've got, and just give you a chance to see what can be done with that tool. And so I think the simple answer is yes. The longer answer is we can create, much like everything else, we'll create something that will work for you, what's best for you. Because again, that is, at the end of the day, that's what we're here for.
Yeah.
Danny, I don't know if I touched all of it or not, or if that's okay.
Yeah, just reach out.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I love the customization. I'm really hearing that, and that's what Trivista prides itself on, is great customer service. So that's what I'm hearing from the
Yes.
telematics side as well. Okay, guys, so we're nearing the end of our time today. Is there anything else that you'd like to add on this topic before we sign off?
I'll just say that, again, thank you for the time, and likely this will be a continued series. There's, like I said, with every individual tool on that Swiss Army knife, there's probably a podcast that we could have to get into the weeds. But I want to encourage everyone to kind of visit our website at www.trivistacompanies.com. You'll find there in the near future a new telematics section with the ability to kind of take a look at what we're offering, schedule some time to do a consultation, and just learn more across the board about how Trivista can support you. So thanks again for your time, and thanks for listening.
Yes, and thank you both.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I'd say thank you as well. I appreciate the opportunity, and this is a space that there's so much coming at us and so fast. I'm just very grateful that we have a young person like Danny who is able to digest this stuff and keep us between the rails, because it'd be very easy to get kind of into a squirrel event of, oh, let's go this way, oh, let's go this way, and I think Danny's got a pretty focused and obviously passionate approach to how he's addressing this.
I would agree completely, Jim. So, Danny, speaking to that, if somebody hears this podcast and would like to reach out to you, would you want to share your contact information for them?
Absolutely. So you can reach me at O'Halloran, DOHALLORAN @trivistacompanies.com. Feel free to reach out, shoot me an email, and we'll go ahead and get things going. If that's not your best conduit, you can give me a call at 515-218-0715.
All right. Thank you very much. And thank you both for today's discussion. We'll be looking forward to our next telematics talk very soon.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
We hope you've enjoyed this edition of the Truck Talk with Trivista podcast. You can find more podcast talks or general information about Trivista Companies and its many dealerships at trivistacompanies.com. Until next time, be safe out there.